The Emperor's New Clothes. Many years ago, an emperor was so excessively fond of new clothes that he spent all his money on fancy things to wear. He did not bother himself in the least about his soldiers, nor did he care to go hunting or to watch sports or go to concerts or the theater, except for the opportunities he had there to display and show off his new clothes. He wore a different suit for each hour of the day, and while people would say of any other king or emperor, "He is sitting in council with his advisers," of this emperor it was always said, "He is changing clothes in his dressing room." Time passed merrily in the large town which was his capital city. Strangers arrived every day at the court. One day, 2 rogues, calling themselves weavers, made their appearance. They told everyone that they knew how to weave material of the most beautiful colors and elaborate patterns, and any clothes manufactured from this material would have the wonderful quality of remaining invisible to everyone who was extremely foolish, or who was not fit for the office he held, that is, for his job. "These must indeed be splendid clothes," thought the emperor. "If I had such a suit, I could at once find out what men in my realms are unfit for their office, and also be able to distinguish the foolish from the wise. This cloth must be woven for me immediately." And he paid large sums of money to be given to both of the weavers, in order that they might begin their work right away. So the 2 false weavers set up 2 looms, that is, 2 large wooden frames on which to weave thread into cloth, and they pretended to work very busily, though in reality they did nothing at all. They asked for the most delicate silk and the purest gold thread, then hid all these expensive materials in their own knapsacks, and then continued their imaginary work at the empty looms until late at night. "I would like to know how the weavers are getting on with my cloth," said the emperor to himself, after a little time had passed. He was, however, rather embarrassed when he remembered that a dummy, or someone unfit for his office, would be unable to see what the weavers were making. Of course, he thought he was sure that he had nothing to worry about, but still he thought he would prefer to send somebody else to bring him intelligence about the weavers and their work, instead of troubling himself about it. All the people throughout the city had heard of the wonderful quality the cloth was supposed to have, and all were anxious to learn how wise, or how foolish, their neighbors might prove to be. "I will send my best adviser, my faithful prime minister, to visit the weavers," said the emperor at last, after some deliberation and thought. "He will be best able to see how the cloth looks, for he is a very intelligent man, and no one can be more suitable for his office than he is." So the faithful old prime minister went into the great room where the knaves were at their empty looms, pretending to work with all their might. "What can be the meaning of this?" thought the old man, opening his eyes very wide. "I cannot see the least bit of thread on the looms." However, he did not express his thoughts out loud. The tricky impostors very politely asked him to come nearer their looms, and then asked him whether the design pleased him and whether he thought the colors were very beautiful, at the same time pointing to the empty frames. No matter how hard the poor old prime minister looked and looked, he could not discover anything on the looms, and for a very good reason. There was nothing there. "What?" he thought again. "Is it possible that I am a simpleton, a fool? I have never thought so myself, and if I am one, no one must ever know. Can it be that I am unfit for my office? No, that must not be said either. I will never confess to anyone that I could not see the cloth." "Well, Prime Minister," said one of the tricky crooks, still pretending to work, "you do not say whether the cloth pleases you." "Oh, it is excellent," replied the old prime minister, looking at the loom through his spectacles, that is, through his glasses. "The pattern is gorgeous, and the colors are wonderful. Yes, I will tell the emperor without delay how very beautiful I think your work is." "We shall be very grateful to you," said the impostors, and then they named the different colors and described the pattern of the pretended cloth. The old prime minister listened attentively to their words in order that he might repeat them to the emperor, and then the crafty rogues asked for more silk and gold, saying that it was necessary to complete what they had begun. However, all that was given to them they hid in their knapsacks and pretended to work as busily as before at their empty looms. The emperor now sent another minister from his court to see how the weavers were getting on, and to learn whether the cloth would soon be ready. As the prime minister had done before, the second minister surveyed the looms on all sides, but could see nothing at all but the empty frames. The sneaky impostors made the same gestures as before, and again talked of the pretended design and imaginary colors. "Doesn't the cloth appear as beautiful to you as it did to my lord the prime minister?" the sneaky impostors asked. "I certainly am not stupid," thought the messenger. "It must be that I am not fit for my fine, well-paid office. That is very odd, but I must make sure that no one ever knows anything about it." And accordingly, he praised the cloth he could not see, and declared that he was delighted with both the colors and the patterns. "Indeed," he said to the emperor when he returned, "the cloth which the weavers are preparing is extraordinarily magnificent." The whole city was talking of the splendid cloth which the emperor had ordered to be woven, and for which he was paying the weavers very well. And now the emperor himself wished to see the expensive cloth while it was still in the loom. Accompanied by all the most important ministers and officers of the court, including the two who had already claimed to admire the cloth, he paid a visit to the crafty impostors, who, as soon as they were aware of the emperor's approach, pretended to work more diligently and carefully than ever, although they still did not pass a single thread through the looms. "Isn't the work absolutely magnificent?" said the two ministers. "If your majesty will only look at it, what a splendid design, what glorious colors!" And at the same time they pointed to the empty frames, for they imagined that everyone else could see this exquisite piece of workmanship. "How is this?" said the emperor to himself. "I can see nothing. This is indeed a terrible situation. Am I a foolish simpleton? Or am I unfit to be an emperor? That would be the worst thing that could happen." And he said aloud, "Oh, the cloth is charming. It has my complete approval." And then he smiled most graciously and looked closely at the empty looms, for he was much too embarrassed and afraid to admit that he could not see what two of his ministers had praised so highly. All his retinue, his many ministers and officers, now strained their eyes, hoping to discover something on the looms, but they could see no more than the others. Nevertheless, they all exclaimed, "Oh, how beautiful!" and advised His Majesty the Emperor to have some new clothes made from this splendid material, clothes to wear for the procession when all the important people of the Emperor's court would parade through the city. "Magnificent! Charming! Excellent!" all his ministers and advisers cried out, and everyone was extremely merry. The emperor shared in the general satisfaction, and awarded the impostors a ribbon to be worn in their buttonholes, and the honorable title of Gentlemen Weavers. The sneaky rogues sat up the whole night before the day of the procession, and had 16 candles burning, so that everyone might see how anxious they were to finish the emperor's new suit of clothes. They pretended to roll the cloth off their looms, cut the air with their scissors, and sewed with needles without any thread in them. "See," cried they at last, "the emperor's new clothes are ready." And now the emperor, with all the grand people of his court, came to the weavers, and the tricky rogues raised their arms, pretending to hold something up, saying, "Here are your majesty's trousers. Here is the scarf. Here is the long mantle cape. The whole suit is as light as a cobweb. When dressed in it, a person might believe that he has nothing on. That is the special quality of this wonderful cloth." "Yes, indeed," said all the courtiers, all the ministers and officers, although not one of them could see anything but empty air. if your Imperial Majesty will please take off your clothes, we will dress you in the new suit in front of the looking-glass." The Emperor was accordingly undressed, and the crafty rogues pretended to clothe him in his new suit, the Emperor turning his bare flesh from side to side before the looking-glass. "How splendid His Majesty looks in his new clothes, and how well they fit!" everyone cried out. "What a design! What colors! These are indeed royal robes." "The canopy umbrella which is to be carried over your Majesty in the procession is waiting," announced the chief master of the ceremonies. "I am quite ready," answered the Emperor. "Do my new clothes fit well?" asked he, turning his body round again before the looking-glass, in order that he might appear to be examining his handsome suit. The lords who were carrying His Majesty's long mantle cape felt about on the ground as if they were lifting up the ends of the cloth, and pretended to be carrying something, for they couldn't bear the thought that anyone might believe they were foolish or unfit for their positions. So now the Emperor walked under his high canopy umbrella in the midst of the procession, through the streets of his capital city, and all the people standing by, and those at the windows, cried out, "Oh, how beautiful are our Emperor's new clothes! What a magnificent long mantle cape, and how gracefully the scarf hangs!" In short, no one would admit that he was unable to see these much-admired clothes, because in doing so he would have declared himself either a foolish simpleton or someone unfit for his office. Certainly none of the various suits that the Emperor had worn before had ever made such a great impression as these invisible ones. One little boy had climbed a tall tree to see the Emperor as he passed, a boy who had not heard that the clothes would be invisible to foolish or unfit people, and as the procession marched on, the boy cried out with a laugh, "Ha! Ha! But the Emperor has nothing on at all!" "Listen to the voice of innocence!" exclaimed his father, and what the child had said was whispered from one person to another. "But he has nothing on at all!" at last cried out all the people, and they laughed and shouted out, "The Emperor has no clothes!" The Emperor felt quite vexed and upset, for he knew that the people were right, but he thought the procession must still go on. And though they felt remarkably silly, the lords of the court took greater pains than ever to seem to be holding up a mantle train, although in reality there was nothing to hold. When he returned to the palace, the Emperor set all his soldiers to find the weavers, but they had fled with their knapsacks and all the money he had paid them, and were never heard from again. The Emperor sent a minister to find the boy who had climbed the tree, and told the boy that he was the only completely honest and trustworthy person among all his subjects, and that when the boy was of age, he would become the Emperor's prime minister and most trusted adviser.